Freddy Krueger, later known as the Nightmare, was born in the early 1940s as the son of a nun named Amanda Krueger. She was part of a religious order that was an asylum known as Western Hills and did volunteer work. When Amanda was young, she was accidentally locked in an ward for the criminally insane over the holidays, and the inmates kept her hidden for days. When she was found, she was barely alive and is now pregnant with a child. Amanda gave birth in the asylum. She delivered the baby out of shame since nuns are supposed to be celibate. Freddy was put for adoption at a young age. This didn't stop his classmates from learning who he was and bullying him for it, chanting his nickname "Son of 100 Maniacs." Fred's adopted father is found to be extremely abusive. By his teenage years, Freddy learned to embrace the pain, going so far as slicing himself with a razor while laughing just for entertainment. By this point, taking the belts from his adopted father was nothing to him, and he mockingly thanks him while smiling. Years pass, and he manages to find a wife named Loretta, and together they have a daughter, Catherine Krueger, who was born in 1958. Together the family lived on Elm Street. It was at the time where Freddy began kidnapping and killing children, earning himself a new nickname, the Springwood Killer. Freddy crafted his own gloves using a blowtorch and some welding tools in his basement. For each victim he took, he documented the moment in a scrapbook, as well as an array of souvenirs that he kept in his workshop. One day, Catherine moseyed into the basement, where her father kept newspapers, clippings, photos, and other evidence of his crime. While Catherine is browsing through all of it, Freddy is up in the backyard, shaking and beating Loretta for discovering his secret collection. He covered it well enough to make police think that she had gone missing. Mrs. Krueger, wife of Fred Krueger, just disappeared without a trace, according to Detective Smith of Springwood Police Department. Catherine was relocated to an orphanage in 1966, but Freddy would go on terrorizing the town for a couple years. Then he found a job. This way he would evade the police as long as he want. He took the kidnapped kids to the boiler room at this power plant. It estimated that he took 20 to 30 kids. Finally, police caught up to him and arrested Krueger in 1968. Freddy was put on trail. But in the end, someone didn't sign the search warrant in the right place, and Krueger was set free. When the law failed to take down Krueger, the parents of Elm Street decided to take things into their own hands. They tossed Molotov cocktails through the window and watched the fire burn inside. Yet Freddy had been chosen by a higher power because of his ability to ignore pain and his killings on Springwood. Freddy is approached by 3 dream demons who offer him to become eternal. Not much is known about the dream demons, but they go back to ancient Greek times. The dream demons themselves are depicted outside the temple of Morpheus. Morpheus being the Greek god of dreams and nightmares. The parents hid his remains at Pennyborough's, auto-salvaged somewhere that they knew nobody would find his bones. But that didn't stop there. In 1975, 7 years after Freddy was burnt to death, 3 were murdered. The problem just seemed to be getting worse. Nobody knew what was causing these deaths. In March 1981, he chose 4 new targets in his old neighborhood on Elm Street: Nancy Thompson, Tina Gray, Rod Lane, and Glenn Lance. Nancy is a teenage girl attending Springwood High School. She has been having nightmares about a mysterious, disfigured man in a red and green sweater with knives for fingernails, which he scrapes along things. She finds out that her friend Tina had a horrific nightmare the night before as well. Nancy isn't bothered about it, and reassures a distraught Tina that everybody has a bad dream once in a while. Nancy, Tina, and Glenn Lance, Nancy's boyfriend, have a sleepover to comfort Tina. Rod Lane, Tina's rebellious on-off boyfriend, crashes the party and stays for the night, taking Tina to bed. While Rod and Tina are asleep, Tina has another horrific nightmare, getting caught by the mysterious figure and brutally murdered in her sleep, while a disoriented Rod screams for help. When Glenn and Nancy find Tina's body, Rod has disappeared. Shortly afterwards, at the police station, Nancy explains to her father, a police lieutenant, that the reason for the sleepover was that Tina has had a horrible nightmare and didn't want to sleep alone, and that she thought Rod and Tina had settled their differences. Rod becomes the chief suspect for the murder. The next day, Nancy goes to school since she did not get enough sleep the previous night. While walking to school, she is accosted by Rod, who swears that he is innocent. Rod is apprehended by her father and locked away in jail. At school, Nancy falls asleep in class and has another nightmare, but manages to escape from the creepy killer by burning her arm on one of the heating pipes in the terrifying boiler room in which her dream is taking place. She is sent home from school only to find that the arm she burned in her dream is actually burned. A visit to Rod in his jail cell, who insists he didn't touch Tina and that he saw 4 razors cutting her at the same time, convinces Nancy that he is innocent and that something more sinister is afoot. That night, she falls asleep in the bathtub and is once again attacked, but she discovers a bottle of stay-awake pills which she decides to use to combat sleep. Her boyfriend Glenn appears, and she asks him to stay awake and guard her while she goes to sleep to try and find the person stalking her in her dreams. Unfortunately, Glenn also falls asleep, and Nancy is once again nearly killed. She and a skeptical Glenn rush to the police station to talk to Rod, but he has been killed in his cell, strangled by his own bedsheets. To everyone except Nancy, it appears to be a suicide. At Rod's funeral, she tells her father, "I don't know who he is, but he's burned and he wears a weird hat and a red and green sweater. Really dirty. And he uses these knives like giant fingernails." Nancy's mother takes her to a dream therapy clinic, where she has another horrible nightmare. This time, her arm is badly cut 4 times, but she finds that she has taken something out from her dream, the killer's battered hat. She learns from her mother of Fred Krueger, a serial killer of children who was burned to death by vengeful parents after he was freed from prison on a technicality. Nancy becomes convinced that he is exacting his revenge on the children of his killers from beyond the grave. Her mother then says he's dead and can't get to her now, and proves it when she shows Nancy the 4-clawed glove Krueger has been using in the dreams of the children. With that, she assures Nancy that she can sleep now. However, Nancy instead forms a plan with Glenn to bring Krueger out from her dream, knock him out and have him arrested. However, Glenn succumbs to sleep and is brutally killed, sucked into his bed and spat out in a fountain of gushing blood. Nancy has to face Krueger on her own, setting booby traps and luring him out of the dream world into reality. When he returns to finally kill Nancy, she turns her back on him and drains him of all his energy, causing him to disappear. However, Krueger is far from vanquished and kills Nancy's mother. A new family, the Walshes, have moved into the former home of Nancy Thompson. The Walsh's son, Jesse, happens to move into Nancy's old room. He eventually begins to have nightmares of Freddy demanding that Jesse kill for him. Jesse finds Nancy's old diary in which she had been keeping track of her nightmares and her encounters with Freddy Krueger. He goes to his parents in a panic, but they argue and Jesse storms out. Jesse finds himself walking the streets late at night. One night, he walks into a bar where he runs into his gym coach, who takes him back to the gym to run laps. The coach has Jesse hit the showers while he goes back to his office. While he is in his office, the shelves begin to come alive, hurling balls and other sports equipment at him. 2 ropes grab him by the wrists and drag him into the shower. The shower fills with steam and we see Freddy's silhouette in the background, clawing the coach's back. As everything comes into focus, Jesse is the one with the glove on his hand. Jesse's friend Lisa begins to do some digging and uncovers information about Freddy, including the location of the factory where he brought his victims. Meanwhile, Freddy visits Jesse's younger sister, but when she wakes up, it's actually Jesse standing there, with the glove on his hand. Jesse enlists his other friend, Grady, to watch over him while he sleeps. Once Jesse falls asleep, Grady turns out the lights for himself. As soon as Grady is asleep, Jesse awakens and begins to scream in pain. Krueger is coming out and Jesse cannot stop him. With the door jammed, Grady is helpless against Krueger, who impales him on his own door with his glove, killing him. When Krueger looks in the mirror, it turns out that it was Jesse, with Krueger staring back at him from the mirror. Jesse runs to Lisa's house where she is having a pool party. However, Freddy takes control of Jesse and attacks Lisa. Lisa is able to fight off Freddy, who runs from the house and out to the party. Most of the teenager guests run for the fence, only to be confronted by scorching hot metal. Everything begins to heat up, including the pool, burning anyone that is near. Some of them try and talk Freddy down, but are killed immediately. Freddy has them all cornered against the back fence. He exclaims, "You are all my children now." meaning he is going to kill every last one of them. Lisa runs to the old factory, thinking she might save Jesse there. She finds him and tells him that she loves him and that he can fight from the inside. Freddy begins to lose control. As the factory begins to burn to the ground, Freddy himself starts burning. After he dies, the rest of the factory suddenly extinguishes. Just when Lisa thinks it is all over, Freddy's burnt corpse begins to move. Jesse begins to crawl out of Freddy's ashes. The following Monday, Jesse goes back to school. He climbs the bus, finally relieved that it is all over. But something is wrong. The bus is traveling too fast. Jesse panics and jumps up, only to find out there is nothing wrong. The bus is coming to its regular stop. As he and Lisa rest at ease, Freddy's glove bursts through their friend's chest, killing her, and the bus speeds off the main road and into the open land, just like in Jesse's nightmares, followed by Krueger's laugh in the background. At some point in 1987, 17-year-old Kristen began to have recurring nightmares involving Freddy Krueger and the old Elm Street house. Following his death, 3 dream demons had allowed Krueger to haunt the dreams of his murderer's children. Any injuries that the so-called Elm Street children suffered in these nightmares happened in the waking world. Recently, Freddy had been killing numerous children in their sleep, and Kristen was one of his latest targets. One night that year, Kristen stayed up very late, under the pretense that she was waiting for Elaine to come home, but in reality she was finishing her papier-mâché model of the Elm Street house, trying to ward off sleep. When she eventually fell asleep, Kristen suffered a nightmare in which she entered the Elm Street house and was chased by Freddy before entering a room full of dead teenagers. Upon waking up, Kristen went into her bathroom only to discover she was still dreaming. Freddy, disguised as the sink faucet, cut her wrist with his razors, causing her to fall unconscious. The next morning, Elaine took her daughter to Weston Hills Asylum to be treated for what Elaine thought was attention-seeking. When the orderlies attempted to sedate Kristen, and thus put her to sleep, the teenager went into a rage, cutting the wrist of Max, one of the orderlies. Kristen, in a state of shock, began to sing the jump rope song designed by neighborhood children based on the story of Freddy. Kristen only calmed down when Nancy Thompson, a woman looking for a job at the hospital and herself an old adversary of Freddy Krueger, came in and finished the rhyme for her. The next day, a calmed Kristen began to attend group sessions with the other troubled teens of the hospital, supervised by Nancy and Dr. Neil Gordon. The assembled teens were the last 7 remaining children of Elm Street, and had all ended up in the hospital as a result of surviving attacks from Freddy. After Freddy killed Kristen, he absorbed her soul and gets her dream powers, but Alice did too, but it was released at the end. In The Dream Master, Alice was a friend of Kristen Parker's, who dated her brother Rick. After her friends Kincaid and Joey were killed, Alice was pulled into Kristen's fight with Freddy Krueger, who was plaguing the children of Elm Street. When Kristen was killed, she passed her power to Alice, but it went through Freddy first, taking a part of himself into Alice. She was too late to save Kristen in the real world, however, and Kristen burned to death. Freddy then begins to use Alice to gain access to the dreams of other children, and proceeds to kill Rick and many of Alice's friends. However, Alice absorbs the dream powers and personality traits of each victim, causing her to become the Dream Master. Alice confronts Freddy in the dream world, but is unable to seriously harm him despite her newly acquired powers. Just as Freddy has her cornered, she recalls the last part of the Dream Master rhyme. In the reflection of my mind's eye, evil will see itself, and it shall die. Using a piece of broken glass, she forces Freddy to see himself. This somehow enables the imprisoned souls of his victims to escape, tearing Freddy to pieces and, in the process, killing him. In The Dream Child, Freddy uses the dreams of Alice's unborn son, Jacob, to murder more people, including Daniel Jordan, the father of Alice's baby. Freddy plans to use Jacob to be reborn into the real world. However, Alice, with help from the spirits of both Amanda Krueger and Jacob, defeats Freddy once more and traps him inside Amanda Krueger. Alice later gives birth to Jacob and moves away from Springwood. Freddy Krueger was a gardener in a local junior school in Springwood. During his time as the gardener, he had a craving for little children and started to lure them to a hidden room where he abused them. Even while he lived, Freddy Krueger was a creature of nightmares for those who truly knew him. Hiding behind a mask of warmth and friendliness, Freddy's actual temperament was known only to his victims. When those victims were finally heard, the parents of Springwood tracked Freddy down and took the law into their own hands. They thought that fire had rid them of a monster that night, that their children were finally safe. But evil as strong as his has a way of surviving. Years passed. The horror was buried. The victims mercifully forgot. Then, somehow, Freddy returned, and dreams became nightmares once again. Freddy focused his anger on those he felt had wronged him, building up to his one true obsession, Nancy Holbrook. But he underestimated her strength and resourcefulness. Together with her friend Quentin Smith, she managed to weaken Freddy, mutilating him and leaving him for dead once more. Death didn't want Freddy the first time he encountered it. Why did they think it would take him now? He emerged once more, consumed with vengeance. Then he turned his sights on the boy who had blocked his path to Nancy, his number one. Freddy invaded Quentin's dreams, terrorizing him night after night, until his strength and defenses would be at their lowest. When the time was right, he forced the boy to return to the dark reflection of Badham Preschool. Here, he would have his final revenge. Freddy stalked the boy through the school's halls. He took his time, savoring every moment of the hunt. This was what he enjoyed the most, the smell of their sweat in the air, the ragged gasps of their terrified breath. They were his to toy with. There was the boy, at the end of a long corridor. Too tired and scared to run anymore? Resigned to his fate, Freddy closed in, arms wide, claws raking the wall. Their tips traced along a pipe, the metallic shrieking only adding to the boy's apprehension. A shower of sparks rained on the ground and into the liquid that covered the tiled floor. A blue flame blossomed and quickly engulfed the room. The boy took flight as Freddy burst from the flames in a fury. Rooms and walls raced past in a blur until they were in Freddy's basement. There would be no escape from here. Slowly Freddy closed in on the boy. His fear was so strong now that Freddy could almost taste it, but his eyes burned with a defiant hatred that was almost admirable. Freddy drew back his claws. Then Freddy felt another presence with him. Something old, powerful and dark. A miasma enveloped him, and the only sensation was a sound like wooden beams flexing and creaking in the distance. The echoing groan of metal crushed against metal, something arcane and unknowable halfway between language and pure terror. A moment of falling and spinning, and then Freddy was back in the school. But not his school. It looked the same, but it felt different. His powers were tempered in some ways and focused in others. The boy had gone for now, but another prey walked the hallways. Some would be inconsequential, others would become his new favorites. All would fall before his claws.